No role plays, no conference calls, no BS. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader. This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And welcome to this week's Thoughtful Thursday. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube at Hacking Your Leadership and leave us a review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. On this Thoughtful Thursday, I want to talk about a listener question. We haven't read one of these on the air, in an episode recently. We get listener questions all the time. We get feedback on Instagram and LinkedIn all the time. But this listener question kind of popped out at me because it resonated. I read this and I thought, oh, this is a good topic. We need to mention this. A listener reached out and said that they noticed that changes were happening in terms of the conversations that they had with their leader, that her leader was sitting her down, and that the conversation felt different than it had in previous years around how the connection is had with her team. And so it wasn't just a kind of turning the heat up on results or outcomes. It included kind of turning the heat up on how those connections were discussed, or how the kind of the relationship was with the team members, and that felt very different to her. The most important part of this question was, she said that she had peers or coworkers that were reaching out to her and saying that they were honestly terrified that they were going to lose their job, that they didn't have the skills needed in order to make these changes. And this person wanted to know if we've seen this happening across other industries, or if we've heard this from other people before. I love this question, and the short answer is yes, it's happening everywhere.
Yeah, no, I think it's good dialogue. I mean, there's been a lot's been going on. I think just with globally across industries, across businesses right now, and there has been a lot of questions and comments and things that we've received specifically about that. That like, hey, it feels like the expectations are getting higher, and what I think, to a degree, is like, I don't know that necessarily the expectations are getting higher, but they are changing.
Sure.
And in a lot of businesses and organizations and industries, and this listener it comes from an office space in a specific industry where I don't know that they're saying we need to have more of an outcome specifically. We need the same outcome to continue, and we need you to do it in a way that is bringing our people along and making sure that they have a really elevated experience, right? And I think that is where we're seeing this kind of play out. We've talked a lot about this, that the leaders that have the ability to connect, to have empathy, to be able to understand people's perspectives, to include their teams in the dialogue, that create kind of a very open and synergetic workplace, while also having the skill set to say, we do all of this so that we can perform, and not just maybe at the expectation, but above it. Mm-hmm. That is a very key skill that requires a good amount of experience and background and understanding, because it's not an easy way to do both at the same time. It is both at the same time. Let me be clear about it. It is both, like, you have a responsibility and something that you need to make sure you deliver on. And as a leader of people, you have a responsibility to bring them along on that and to empower them and create great spaces for them. And what I have learned in my career is that typically when you have that approach to leadership and you're doing both of those things at the same time, that's when you get to high-performing teams the fastest, and that's where you really have a cascading of talent and development and work systems that are easier to replicate and or scale, because you're spending the time with intention in both places at the same time, and you're teaching people that their outcomes really are the truest measurement of their effectiveness and efficiency in leadership and in the job that they have. And some people right now in all industries are struggling with that.
Oh, you're spot on. The verbiage that the listener used was that the bar has been raised, and I like your response, because no, the bar hasn't been raised. The bar is just changing. Meaning, if this isn't something that you struggle with, the bar hasn't been raised. It's just something that you do. If my leader sat me down and said, "I need you to fly to work starting tomorrow," well, the bar's been really raised because I can't fly, right? But
Yeah.
but if these are natural skills that you have, if you know how to do this, then no, the bar hasn't been raised. You should feel like doors are opening for you in terms of how you get promoted and how you can move up with an organization and the career opportunities that you have now, because if this is where your skills naturally lie. This is a broad generalization, but I think a lot of leaders gravitate towards one or the other, not both. A lot of leaders are either really great at collaborating and making sure that their teams feel like they're being brought along for the journey, and maybe they struggle more with delivering the outcomes that are needed or holding people accountable to an outcome. Or they're really great at driving an outcome really hard in a way that is not collaborative and that does not bring their team along. I know even leaders who are good at doing both, they're good at doing both because they work at whatever the other one is. One of those two things is a very natural thing for them, and the other one is something that they have to put work and effort in their own personal development in order to make sure that other part is there and that it's a both thing. They're not kind of shirking one to focus on the other. And so what I want to ask you, Lorenzo, is what advice would you have for a leader who might be struggling with this, who is naturally better at one or the other of these two things? They know they need to do both. They know the train is leaving the station and they struggle with this. So I want to ask you that, but first I want to give it up to word from one of our sponsors. All right, Lorenzo, if a leader is listening to this and they're struggling with this, what advice do you have for them?
I think it boils down to two things. The first one is having the intellectual honesty to look in the mirror and say out loud exactly what you just said, which is, I am struggling here. And not just saying it to yourself, but going to your peers and going to your direct boss and saying, I am struggling here and I need some help and I need some development, right? Because I think what happens a lot of times is instead of doing that, their ego gets involved, they get scared, they get anxious, and they run. Instead of actually having the conversation and asking for the help that's needed. Because I think in most environments, if you are delivering on one of those two things and the bar is changing and you go to your boss and say, hey, I want to continue to perform for you in my role, but I need help here. Like, I am struggling and I could definitely use your help or somebody's help or some type of direction here to be able to get me down the road so that I can have success in these two spaces. Now, that's step number one. Step number two is you also have to commit to yourself that you're willing to take the actions to get better at it. You can't just put this onto a boss or a peer or say that's up to somebody else to teach me how to get better at these two things. People need to be aware that you're struggling so that they can give you some grace, they can give you some help, and they can provide you with some resources that may help you get there, and they're aware of it. You're not ignoring it. You're not running from it. You're not pretending like everything is fine, but you are actually being honest enough with yourself to do that. But with the second thing, when you commit to yourself, you need to be learning every week, if not every day. You have to spend time in the space, especially if you are a leader of people, to get better at becoming a leader of people. You have to either read, listen to audiobooks, listen to podcasts, talk about it. Doesn't matter to me what you do. But if you're not continually thinking about, reading about, and talking about how this is evolving and changing from an expectation of leadership, if you are not aware of these concepts and spending time learning about them and figuring out how do they apply to your everyday, then you are shortchanging yourself. And you're not going to get better. And whatever you ask for at work for help is never going to be enough to actually get you across the line that you need to be at to continue to have success in these roles. So like that for me is, I think, the two pieces that I think are the largest that leaders really have to think about and consider if you are willing to do the work to get better. If you are not willing to do the work to get better, then that is what that is. And I think that will be very apparent because you won't ask for the help. You won't show up and work hard. You won't take the commitment to try to better yourself. We'll see that in your behaviors and your actions. But if you really want to do that, you really have to do those two things.
Right. And if you're 2 years from retirement, maybe you can string this along and then exit, gracefully when it's time to, kind of hang up your hat and retire. But if you have more than, say, 2 years left before you can retire, these are changes you are going to have to make, or they will be made for you, unfortunately. Like this is just the way it's going. One of the things I love that you said there is around asking for help from your boss or your peers reaching out. And I picture leaders listening to that and thinking, I don't want them to know that I'm struggling with this. And my answer to that is they already know you're struggling with it.
Exactly.
They already
Why do you think
know.
you had
They
that conversation?
see it.
Right?
They see it.
Exactly.
You just haven't, they just don't know that you know. That's the only thing. So I love that. Don't think that you're somehow like, letting the cat out of the bag by having these conversations. It's already out. So you will only do positive things by having these conversations. But again, it puts you on the hook for it. It's the same thing as posting on Facebook on January 1st. I'm going to lose 50 pounds this year. Doing that means that your friend list will know whether it happened by your picture post in December. This is the same thing. If you put yourself out there, you ask your leaders and your peers for help and support. They will give it to you, but they will be watching to see whether or not you actually meant it by the actions you take as you go forward.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And have a great day.